Hello, everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. I'm your host, Olivia Atkin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We will give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Lina Taylor. Lina is the founder and CEO of Climate Executive Coaching. Climate Executive Coaching is a global organization working to accelerate results for climate action and sustainability leaders and teams through science-based training and solution-focused coaching. You can find Lina by going to her website, climateexecutivecoaching.com, or by emailing her at lina@linataylor.com. Hello, Lina. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Hello, Olivia. It's really good to be here.
I'm so excited. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Lina Taylor?
It's a great question. I love that you start the show off with that question because it really depends on how each person defines success. I think we go through as a person going through the world, we go through an evolution of getting to know ourselves better. And I personally believe that the obstacles that we meet along the way help us to discover a little bit more fully who we are and what we bring into the world. So that definition of success, I believe fully that it should look different as we go through the different ages that we are. So if you're in your teen years, success may have looked like, for example, for me, it may have looked like I wanted to play professional sports on the international arena. As you get a little bit older, success may look like academic success or starting creating a family. For me today, what success looks like is to really be present in each moment, to not be thinking so far ahead or so far behind that I'm missing what's happening in the moment right now. So that could be spending time with my kids. That could be spending time with my husband. It could be spending time on the business that I'm working, the person that's across from me, us conversing and talking right now. Being present is how I measure success at the moment.
And I love that. And I love how you bring up that success changes over time. And it should be changing as you grow and as you achieve different things and you're in different segments of your life. You've definitely had different segments of your life, and you touched upon that in your answer. So I want to start more towards the beginning, and then we will go more towards where you are today and your journey. But I want to bring up something you said on, if you had asked you years ago as a teen what success looked like, it was playing sports on an international level. And you definitely did that. You went to the Olympics and played at an international level, I would say. For you, in that point of your life, you were overcoming many different obstacles. You played a sport where people told you wouldn't be able to play. What was that journey like for you from deciding to go to the Olympics and train to being at the Olympics and just that start to finish aspect of your journey?
Yeah, exactly. That's where my definition of success comes from. It was going through that journey. So growing up in communist Bulgaria, that's where I grew up. This is the accent that you hear. I was only 5 years old when I saw the Olympic flame go through our city to from Athens, from Greece, where it's lit usually, and then the runners take it and the torch goes from country to country to the host country. So seeing that as a child left a big impression on me. And later on, when I started playing indoor volleyball, of course, with my friends, we would dream that we would be winning, Olympic medals. We would be standing on the podium, and that would drive us to practice extra hard. Now, as the way that things were set up in Bulgaria, as I was finishing up high school, I realized that there was a ceiling for me there. There may not be things that were not within my control. There may not be opportunities that I was looking for to play at that level. And so I pivoted. I made a change because I realized that what I was really looking to create was a better life for myself, for my family, for my community. And what that looked like at the beginning was that I would do it by playing volleyball. That was a way that I would be able to create that better life. Now, I made a change and decided to pursue my education. So I had an opportunity that came out of nowhere, really, to come to the United States and get my education. I studied biology at the university while I was on a volleyball scholarship. And at that time, success and what I wanted to do looked like getting a full time job. I started working in the biotech industry, and I thought I was living the American dream. Now, watching the Olympics on TV one day, beach volleyball came on as an Olympic sport. And as I was watching that exciting game, you probably have watched beach volleyball too. It's really exciting. It's very dynamic. It looks really hard and challenging. But I thought, what if I could play beach volleyball in the Olympics? You know, I knew there was no way for me to go back to Bulgaria to play indoor volleyball, but for beach volleyball, I just needed one more person. And so I asked my sister to try it. And at first, you can imagine, without any kind of coaching, any kind of funding, it was a very humbling experience for anybody out there that's tried to play beach volleyball. They probably can attest to the same thing. And we weren't very successful to begin with. We had to even at one point sleep on the streets because we didn't have enough money to pay for our hotel. And so I had to dig a little deeper and ask myself, you know, why was it important for me to play in the Olympics, even though there was no guarantee that that would happen? And the answer that I came to through some soul searching in that difficult circumstance, and this is why I say that these obstacles that we run into, they really present an opportunity for us to get in touch with deeper things that matter for us on a much deeper level. At first, it looked like I was pursuing this glamorous lifestyle, playing professional beach volleyball, going all around the world. But I realized that may not be my reality. My reality may be something very different than what I was seeing on TV. So if I still wanted to pursue it, I had to get in touch with that deeper reason. And it really turned out to be watching our parents struggle through communism and not feeling like they have their lives in their hands. So for me, the quest became about creating a life on my terms, where I wouldn't be defined by the circumstances around me, that I would have a little bit more say-so in what I wanted to do. So that was the underlying reason and what really pushed me to stick with it, even though the odds were stacked against us. Now, together with my little sister, we figured it out. We figured out how to play a whole new game, how to do it without any coaching or any kind of funding. And we ended up qualifying for the Olympic Games and played in 2 Olympics, and played on the professional tour for a number of years.
And I love how you discussed there figuring out your focus and what your underlying meaning is. And I love how you discussed that journey in it as well, because starting any game, moving to another country, whatever it might be, those are real obstacles, you know, first generation going through that, but then also going, I'm going to make it to the Olympics and I don't care who says what, I'm going to get there. And doing that is a very big undertaking to have, and just understanding that today's obstacle is tomorrow's success is very important in that too, because those days can get very long. Those, you know, defeats or journeys of the highs and the low lows are definitely there. After being done with touring and, you know, your Olympic journey, how did you find your passion to climate and sustainability?
Oh, that's a great question too. So it took a few years and a few different iterations of what success looks like, and really getting in touch with what am I really good at. So those are the components, and I just kind of want to go back for a tiny moment to talk about what exactly allows us to pursue something. And what you touched on is that focus. Being able to identify what is important to us. So starting with the question, what is important? What do you want to create? And then really digging into, well, why is that important to you? So that underlying reason is where you find the focus. Because once you know that, once you have clarity on that, then you can look at what stands in the way between where you are at the moment and where you want to be. Now, we had to make a very concerted commitment to eliminate some of those distractions that we had. And so the question that is key to ask there is, what is something I can do right now today that will take me just one step closer in the direction that I want to go? Now, the reason why that is important is because if you take away that distraction of how big that may seem, how overwhelming it may seem, and you focus on something that is within your control today, that is exactly how we make progress. So I'm making a bridge from that to your question of how I found my climate and sustainability passion. I was sitting with my neighbor one day during COVID. It was right at the beginning of the lockdown, and we were doing an exercise of figuring out what are our passions. We listed, 10 or 12 things, whatever are important to us. At the very top of my list, I said climate and the environment is important to me, and then I had family, I had other different things, my community here in San Diego, what is important to me. And it was really apparent when I wrote it down to see that there was a bit of a disconnect between how important I said that was to me and what I was doing about it. I was recycling and teaching my kids about recycling, but it didn't feel like that was enough. And so I started asking my question, well, what else could I be doing? If I say that this is something that's very important for me, I want to feel an integrity with what I say is important to me. So what else could I be doing? And through my explorations of, I started doing a lot of presentations for companies, a lot of team coaching. I was asked to be an executive coach, and I went through the whole coaching diploma and certification for the process and started helping leaders at some very big companies to advance their projects. And I thought to myself, if I'm good enough to help leaders at these companies, on a global level to accelerate their results, what if I do the same thing that I'm good at, but for leaders in climate and sustainability? And that's when the light bulb just went off. And that was the beginning of climate executive coaching.
And I love that because you really touched upon the fact of the aspect that you have to align your priorities and your passion with what you're actually doing about those things. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing to do sometimes, because until you really sit down and analyze what is important to me, like you did and you just discussed, and then going, am I doing everything I can be doing or really doing anything with that you get to see if there's a disconnect. Are you really fulfilling that? And then question yourself to what is that next step? What else can I be doing? Or am I doing all that I can? And I think that's really important to understand, that it isn't just saying, hey, this is important to me, but it's saying, why is it important to me? And am I doing anything about it?
Exactly. You named it perfectly. And I would add, there is one more component there. So once you identify, this is important to me, this is why it's important to me, am I doing everything that I possibly can? Now, if you just jump right in, you may get what we often experience as imposter syndrome, right? Because you may not yet have the skills and capabilities of doing this, what you say that you want to do. So that is a really important step to be really honest with ourselves, to ask ourselves, what are my skills in this area? What are my capabilities? And is there something that I can do to increase that? I am constantly asking myself that question on a daily basis. And so this learning capacity that I believe we have immeasurable capacity to continue to develop our learning and capabilities is something to really look at as accountability, not to just say, oh, this looks like a great idea. Oh, this is why I want to do it, and then jump right in. No, back it up with skills, back it up with learning, take whatever necessary courses are out there. And now we have, through the internet, we have the ability to learn pretty much anything that we can, connect with people that are in that area. So I'm constantly increasing my capacity to deliver value in what I say is important to me.
And I love that. And the fact you went deeper and explained to us that you have to have the skills to back it up. You don't want to become imposter. You start feeling it. People realize it right away too. So they're not going to be buying what you're trying to sell anyway. And so you have to really figure out how you're going to back that up. For you, you brought up your, how you were meeting with these executives, you were making changes in other ways, and then you were able to align that with with your coaching and making an impact with your climate executive coaching, and you got the certifications. But in the initial moment of figuring out, okay, wow, this is actually really on the top of my list. I didn't realize how on the top of the list it was. And then saying, okay, I'm going to push forward. There's more I have to do. How did you connect that point in that moment to, okay, what are those next steps so I can back up what I'm trying to do? What was that mental process like?
Yeah, it could be scary. It could be scary sometimes because it takes a leap. And I believe that once you start doing that process and examining it, we become better at that leap. And I've had to do it many, many times in my life, where I was cut from my team early on in my teens, and I had to take a leap, show back up at practice the very next day, sleeping on the streets, like I said, with my sister, trying to figure it out. So taking that chance on yourself. But it's the ability to ask yourself the question, well, and to be honest. First, we're talking about resilience. This is what we're really talking about. So resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, right? So how do you do that? The first part of it is to accept that we don't control every outcome around us. We don't. Sometimes we think that we might, but we really don't. So that acceptance is key, and it takes a lot of humility to have acceptance that we don't control every circumstance, and then to have the honesty to ask ourselves to take responsibility. So what is it that I need to have in order to be successful? What is needed? And this is where social skills come into play, where you can talk to people that have gone through that process before. You can ask a lot of questions. Now we have the internet and all kinds of different tools to ask questions and to see what are the skills that are needed in this marketplace that I want to play in.
For you, as you went through that journey and you were learning more about climate and sustainability, what was the biggest learning, I guess, journey or fact that you thought you knew that you didn't within the climate and sustainability world?
With climate and sustainability, with what's going on right now, it is the defining issue of our time. In the next 5 to 6 to 7 years, we have to make immense changes in our society. And they start from the top down, from government level, from corporate level, but they also go from the bottom up. And so what we're seeing now is that there is a bit of a gap between what people individually feel that they're able to do to contribute to making changes in a positive way towards treating nature better, treating our environment better, not having that extractive mentality to win at all cost. I think those days are over. We are realizing, and COVID kind of helped us do that, is that we're connected to everything around us. So how we treat the environment around us is really important. And so what I'm trying to help people do is to meet those corporate ambitions, those government ambitions that we have at city levels, at country levels, with the capacity that people have to feel like they're able to make the necessary changes. When those two meet, change happens.
And I think that's important to understand that it comes from both aspects. Once I can't be doing all the work, whether it's the bottom or the top, they have to meet in the middle at some point. And without that, there is no real answer. Things don't get implemented. It takes everyone, right? It takes that village to really make the difference. Lina, why do you think it's important for individuals and businesses to truly understand that climate and sustainability, not just for today, but like you said, the next 5, 7, 15 years, and the impact they can be making today that affects those timelines?
I think that people are waking up to the fact that you can't just go and irresponsibly buy things and throw them away, that there is an impact there that happens to the planet and that there is a price to pay. The things that we work so hard for example, you want to go on a vacation in a beautiful area. Well, you have to realize that what's happening with climate change is that the planet is heating up. And with the heating up of the planet, the glaciers are melting, sea levels are going up. Those beaches that we may want to go on vacation, they may disappear. So if we don't do something different, the things that we value are may not be there, not for even in our lifetime, if we're talking about not just thinking about our children and grandchildren and so on. And so I think we have a very unique responsibility here, and not to, it's really important to understand that it's not about shaming people into action. It's about empowering people to make wiser choices. That's really what it comes down to.
And I think that's really important. And we even saw that, it's interesting you brought up the water and the beaches, because if you looked at pictures a month, even, I think it was even sooner than that when COVID hit in Italy, and these areas that had the water that were dark green, and it was water-based towns, but the water was dark green and you couldn't see to the bottom. And now all of a sudden you're seeing the bottom, you're seeing fish, you're seeing different sea life actually there. And it was interesting. One of the pictures in Italy itself, I went to Italy a few years ago, 2018, 2019, and I was in some of those towns they were showing images of. And if you look at pictures of me in those towns, I'm standing up against, someone's balcony or whatever it might be, and the water's right there. You couldn't see an inch below that water. You didn't know what was there. And then fast forward, and you're seeing this blueness, this clearness, these animals thriving in those environments. And it's like, wait, were they there before? And we just didn't know because of the decay and whatever might be going on? Or is it now because these things aren't affecting the water that they're able to thrive and survive?
Well, Olivia, that's a beautiful example. It shows us how powerful nature really is. When we take away the pollution that we're causing, as human beings living our ordinary lives, we saw that happened during COVID, and it was really clear how quickly things can bounce back. So that's exactly the hope and the optimism that we have, and what we're working with is because nature has the capacity to regenerate. So how can we think regeneratively in our daily lives so that we can give it a chance to regenerate itself, take away the things that are harming it? So that's exactly what happened during COVID, is we stopped doing the pollution, we stopped doing the things that were harming the environment around us.
And I think you see some of those effects still happening, right? If you look at something, I don't want to say as simple, but something that has definitely taken an effect of the amount of people that are driving around. You still today, after COVID, really pressed the fact that people don't need to be driving into the office every day. You can work from home. Well, that immediately releases the gases that go into the air because not as many cars are on the road. So you're still seeing some of those positive effects in our environment because of what COVID did, and it challenged our mindsets of how can we still work and how can we make that difference. And even the small things that people might not think about, like, okay, well, those people who are 50% work at home or 100% work at home, you're now helping the environment with the elimination of having to drive every day to the office. That's one location you're not driving.
It's amazing what we're capable of doing and figuring out when we have the right conditions around us. And I think this is what, on a global level, on a systemic level, we have to really start redesigning. And it's happening. It's happening. We have the tools that we need to make the energy transition, for example, and you're seeing it. Governments all around the world are starting to subsidize solar and wind and clean energy versus the polluting energy from the fossil fuels. Is it enough at this point? No. So we have to stay vigilant about what is really making that difference and what's going to take us across the finish line. And this is a process that we can continue to learn. I think that was the biggest thing that we can take away from COVID, is that not everything is set in stone. We can do things differently. And when you combine the capability that we're constantly developing with the political will and just the will to act differently, to make different choices, I think that's when you're going to see changes happen on a systemic level. And it's really important to note that what we talked about earlier, that it's not just individual people being asked to make different choices on a daily level, on a daily basis. And that's not what I mean. I think that we have to see how our society can function differently as a whole. Because I think, to try to put all the responsibility on government, it's not going to work. All the responsibility on businesses, it's not going to work. All the responsibility on individual people, it is just taking what's within our control. And this is when we come down to, what is something you can do today
Mm-hmm.
that will take you just one step closer in the direction that you want to go? This is a question that everybody can ask themselves that question, and whether they're an individual, whether they're in a position of power in government or in the corporate world. That's what's going to move us in the right direction when we have our North Star. So where are we going? We want to create a life that sustains life around it, that it's not extractive. And I think people are realizing that these profits at all cost us a lot as a society. And when people are affected and they don't have opportunities that will come in the future as a hindrance, so even though there may be wins in the shorter term, when you're not thinking, Indigenous people think 7 generations ahead. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what our life would be like if today we were making choices that we took responsibility for 7 generations ahead? It's an interesting question to ask.
And I think that is a very interesting question. And it makes you really take a step back and think and go, wait, if I was thinking of something from a different perspective, more long term, what would be happening? But I also love how you talk about it's really a team unit, right? In making change and not putting it on one area, whether it's the government, businesses, individuals, it's everyone coming together. And I think that's really important, like you said, to identify is who are those team members and how do those team members come together and make that difference as a unit, but also for those 7 generations ahead, right? Because what we're doing today does affect what their life will be like, even our kids' lives, our grandkids' life. It does affect the longevity. I read a few years ago, when I was still getting my MBA, I took a sustainability class, and I learned a lot of interesting tidbits that people would never think twice about. And one of them, again, this was pre-COVID. I actually ended up taking it the semester that COVID hit. That was my last semester getting my MBA because I did it in 2 semesters, and we did a presentation on sustainability. It was the last class before I went on spring break. Spring break went, and then, well, we're looking at sustainability completely different. So it was very interesting as everything was hitting the news and seeing those sustainability changes in the environment and climate changes to be talking about it in real time. But one of the interesting things I even remember is not just seeing what companies are doing and what individuals, but those things that don't get talked about, right? So going to the clothing store and buying a product like a clothing item, whether it's a shirt or whatever, and the average person at the time was wears that item 7 times in their lifetime. If it gets to that, they wear that one piece of clothing 7 times before throwing it out. And it ended up going to most of the time it goes to these landfills that take years and years for it to go down. And if clothing aren't sold, it just goes straight to that landfill. And seeing the pictures of that too is crazy when you actually go, wait, I'm going to buy this, right? Because if they're projecting and forecasting that you're actually going to buy it, they're going to make it. So if they don't have the real numbers and you buy something off the shelf thinking you're going to use it and then never end up using it, it's twofold. You're now affecting the forecast numbers of what they're actually going to produce, but you're also then going to probably end up throwing it out because if you're not really going to use it. So you've now created twofold. But that impact, when you see the pictures firsthand, really makes you think about when you go into that clothing store next, are you really going to buy that piece of clothing, or are you not going to possibly wear it? But I also think it's important, like you had brought up, is working with those big organizations. Mm-hmm. You have worked with major companies like Amazon, Google, American Express, Pfizer, and many, many more. From your experience, what is it like coming in as a coach, a consultant to a massive organization? And how do you navigate implementing and changing perspectives?
It really comes down to the individual and making the connection in the moment. So through different presentations that I do, I talk a lot about building resilience. I share my story, and when some of these principles that I've extracted from different life experiences um, resonate with the person that I'm sitting across the table, they may think about, how do I put something into practice here? This is where I think it's really important for each and every one of us. I believe that we all carry important lessons through the different things that we have had to overcome. You can learn a lot about leadership from reading books, from taking classes, from looking at other people that are leaders. Yes, that's correct. But I believe that we can learn some of the most important lessons about leadership by looking at our own stories, our own challenges that we've had to overcome, and ask ourselves the question, what is the quality that I developed as I went through this experience? It may have been a painful experience sometimes in the past, but what did I learn from it? And how can that help me so that I can make different choices in the future? So that introspection, I think it's really important. I talk a lot about that in my presentations. And I think when I connect it to a personal story like this is why stories are so important to tell. And this is what you're doing. You're telling stories. You're showing how we can be more successful through different people's stories. So when you connect that learning to what you're facing right now in your situation, how can you make a different choice that will take you a little bit closer to where you really want to be based on your values, based on what you say is important to you? So I make it very personal. That's my particular way that I have found it really resonates. I had a presentation at Nike one time, and it was a senior executive that after, the presentation, I usually like to end with a question, what is one thing that resonated with you that you can put into practice right away? So I asked that question, and you can hear different reflections, how people are just extracting different principles and different points of view based on where they are in their lives. And this one senior executive, I didn't expect that. And so I'll share it with you, shared, what I heard here today made me reflect on how I may be negatively influencing people in my surroundings and discouraging them from pursuing the opportunities that they want to pursue. And this is something that I'll think about and I'll reflect on and do things differently. Now, imagine your senior executive sitting in a room with the people that they're working with saying that level of vulnerability, honesty, openness. What do you think it creates in that situation? It creates a lot of compassion. It creates a lot of connection. So having those real conversations, being able to create the space where it's okay to say, I made a mistake here. I may not be perfect. Well, we know that all of us are not perfect all the time. So how can we create that environment where it's okay to say that? That creates the trust that is needed in order for a team to be successful. So this is just one example of how through my personal story, through being present, creating connections in the moment, and sharing things that I have learned along the way, we are all people, right? It doesn't matter if you're the biggest CEO of a company or you're doing the mail in the mailroom. We're all people. We're going through a lot of similar experiences. And when you get down to that personal level, I think it's when people connect.
And I think that's so important to understand the importance of connectivity and bringing something to the table, as well as making sure everyone feels open, like you said, to be vulnerable, to have the open dialogue, because only open dialogue and discussion is going to create a change. If people aren't open and perceiving it, it creates barriers. And how do you handle some of those barriers when they pop up?
It happens all the time. And when you think about the nature of navigating a new environment, for example, we should sort of expect it, but oftentimes, it hits us and we kind of get taken aback by, oh, this is not what I envision. Well, that happens in my life every single day, right? So getting comfortable with the idea that everything may not look exactly the way that I envision it, the way that I began, and being open and having the humility to accept that fact that in the moment, I talked to you about resilience, and the first step in resilience is to have acceptance that we don't control every outcome. It's a very fundamental idea. And if you think about the times that, for example, you had a hard time in your life and why you struggled, why we struggled, why I struggle, and have negative experiences or emotions that may seem hard in the moment, it is because I'm probably not fully accepting the situation as it's happening in the moment. I'm wanting something to be different. I have expectations of what my vision of how this should be, right? And so it is this difference between our perception, our envisioning the reality, and what is really happening in the moment that creates the discord. It creates what some of the sages through the ages have called suffering, right? So when we don't have acceptance of what is happening right now, that's when suffering occurs. With acceptance and humility, we can move on to the next step of the process, which is now taking responsibility, asking, well, what is something I could have done differently in this situation? What is something that I can do differently in the future? That's taking responsibility. That's being honest with ourselves.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
No, that's what I wanted to say is that the way to navigate the first two steps of navigating the environment when things are difficult, when there are barriers, is to ask yourself a question. Am I being accepting of what is real, what is happening right now, or do I have a different idea? And then, well, what is my role in it? So those two questions is what moves us to then the next part of it, which is the idea of centering, knowing what is important to you. Why is it important to you? And that gives you courage to now reimagine another outcome, right? To find a new path, to see that obstacle and turning into a stepping stone, climb on top of it so that you can see the path even further.
And I think that's really important, is to use your obstacle as a stepping stone and make that climb, because it is always a climb, and you're not going to see that obstacle and then just achieve it and go beyond that just right off the bat. It doesn't work like that. So using it as a stepping stone to meet those goals that you want to achieve and what you want to do. And once you get to that point, you might see another obstacle that
exactly
you can build right off of it. Lina, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, you mentioned it at the beginning. Climate Executive Coaching is the website where you can find me. Also, you could send me an email, Lina Taylor. You can find me on LinkedIn. Lina Taylor, INT is the handle, or any of the other social media.
Thank you, Lina Taylor, for all your insight today.
Thank you, Olivia.
A few of our key takeaways from today's conversation are: obstacles give you opportunities to dive deep and understand your reason. Take the time to understand that an obstacle gives you the ability to pivot, to understand why you're doing something, and then figure out how you're going to do it. Be able to back it up, create those environment, those tools, that learning process that you need to achieve the long-term goal of what that obstacle is. As well as, what do you want to create and why? Why are you doing something? That why is so important when you continuously ask yourself or try to do something. You need your purpose. So what is that purpose? As well as align priorities to with what you're trying to do. When you take the time to say, what am I really passionate about? Like Lina said early, right out of the bat in the show, she took the time to say, what am I really passionate about? One of those things being climate and sustainability. And then asking herself, am I doing everything I possibly can? And that is really important, to saying, if something is this passionate to me, am I taking the time to do it? What am I doing? And it could be something as simple as playing golf. You want to take it to, you need that balance in life to take time to regroup, rethink. Well, if you're passionate about golf, are you practicing your golf swing? Are you actually going out there and taking the time to regroup mentally to push forward? As well as climate and sustainability comes from both top down, but also bottom up. It takes everyone. It takes that village. It takes the community. And to understand that it isn't all on one group of individuals. Everyone needs to come together. Everyone needs to understand their part and what they can be doing to move it forward for not just us who are here right now, but that 7 generations we had talked about earlier, as well as one of my favorites that Lina had brought up is profit is cost and will end up costing you a lot. So that profit, all profits come at a cost. And what is the cost you're really willing to take on, not just now, but in that long-term route? This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Lina Taylor. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.